and welcome to the Future is Freelance podcast, the show for entrepreneurs, digital nomads, slomads, consultants, remote workers, e-residents, and everybody living a life without traditional boundaries. We're here for people who defy categorization, people who make a living and a life their own way. Every Freelance Friday, we're bringing you expert tips, inspired stories, insights from the frontiers of freelancing to help you achieve success with your borderless business, whatever success means and looks like to you as you live life on your own terms. Thank you for listening to The Future is Freelance and for being part of the Future of Work revolution. And today is very special. It's the first episode of season 4. It's a great pleasure to share with you today an interview I actually carried out earlier this year with Rudi Medved from Slovenia. We always try to find people to talk to for this show who are pushing the boundaries and really advancing the conversation in the areas that we talk about. And Rudi is a great example because he's not only been working and living the location-independent lifestyle from the start, he's been studying it too, so reflecting on it from an academic perspective. His recent master's thesis focused on what motivates digital nomadism and work travel, and it led him to an innovative taxonomy of how and why people use remote work to unlock movement and migration and new ways of living and moving around the world. It's absolutely fascinating. That's why I wanted to talk to Rudi about his research. And also, he's got some great insights into what the future might hold and how things might continue to develop. So I'm sure you're going to enjoy this conversation as much as I did. So, Rudi, welcome to The Future is Freelance. It's great to have you with us.
Hey, Maya. Thanks so much for the invitation. I was looking forward to this chat.
Yeah, me too. I'm definitely really interested to hear about what you've been working on. But before that, I know that you've recently completed your master's thesis about digital nomadism and how that affects local communities. But before we unpack that, I'd like to know a little bit more about you and your journey leading up to that piece of research and the work you're doing now.
Yeah, the journey. So I finished, I'm from Slovenia, and actually I come from a small town in a more rural area in Slovenia. And my beginnings were kind of in the technology field. So I applied for a high school of computer science. I finished that and I kind of felt, okay, this isn't so much for me, like to be all in computer science. And I kind of felt more inclined to some like more social science or social topics. So I applied for a faculty of tourism, also in Slovenia on the coast. And I finished that in 2019, the bachelor's. And after that, I also decided after a 2-year break as well to apply to a master's because I was like really trying to like, get deeper in tourism, and maybe I was interested in, I still am interested in academia, so that was the reason. And I worked in hospitality for like all of my like student years since I was 19. So worked in hotels, and my first job was actually in a nightclub. I was washing the dishes. So that was a cool student job to have.
Yeah, the glamorous side of clubbing.
The glamorous. But yeah, in my master's, actually things changed. I got more in contact with my current mentor and with the current team that we do all of the projects. He just founded, when I applied for a master's at our university, he founded like a student kind of department, a club for students who want to do more and like give them more opportunities to like immerse themselves in also entrepreneurial skills and innovation. He's specializing in innovation in tourism. And when I applied for that, things started changing in my head. We got more interested in the startup environment. And actually, COVID then changed it completely and turned my life upside down, as everyone's. And for me, it was like very positive because just in the beginning of COVID, me and 3 other friends, these friends from our university, we co-founded a startup. It was a travel marketplace called Locals from Zero, marketplace for experiences. And after that, since 2020, we've been together working on different things in tourism, from helping tourism providers, consulting destinations, to work in academia and helping other students, as I was helped by my mentor. Now we are like making this possible to other students as well at our university, to get introduced to the, let's say, more entrepreneurial side of tourism.
Interesting, because academia and entrepreneurialism don't always connect as well as they should, do they? And if you're helping people bridge that gap and actually make something commercial out of what they've learned, that's really fantastic. And I love the idea that you started a travel business in the middle of COVID. That's very positive and optimistic.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it was, I think, the perfect time to, like in any other field as well, to think about what we can do to start things differently, what can be improved, especially tourism, which was, as you know, very much affected by COVID. Like, it was a time when everything was shut down. Like, okay, what can we do if we start from zero? And actually, Locals from Zero was the name of our startup. So, like, how to kind of build local communities from zero, but not just like from zero as there's nothing there, but respecting the local traditions and everything. How can we like do things with different people, like now with digital nomads, and with students, people who want to do more, like how we can impact these communities more. So yeah, in general, it was positive to think about this other side of things.
Yeah, that's really cool that you use that hiatus of the whole world and the normal tourism had to pause. And that's a chance to think about how to recreate it better once we could all move again. You obviously saw another big trend coming down the track at you at that point, with the way that digital nomadism was going to explode once everybody had learned to work from home. And they've been locked in those homes for months on end, and then they were going to be free with their laptops. So tell me about your thesis then. What led you to explore digital nomadism in so much depth?
Yeah, well, first of all, again, an inspiration for that was my mentor, Dan.
Mhm.
He was my professor and now mentor of my thesis and my startup mentor and everything, and a friend and everything. So he has been working remotely for the last 10 years, like even before COVID. So he was actually the early adopter of this remote work lifestyle, and I've observed this, and he was the first inspiration, maybe the first person I've met who has such a lifestyle as a kind of a digital nomad, remote worker. Because, as maybe in Slovenia, there's, at least I don't know many digital nomads, so it was a positive
Mm.
influence. Then, because we started our startup during COVID, obviously our team was scattered around Slovenia and then abroad as well. So it was kind of natural to me, like this startup journey, it was natural for me that it's remote. I didn't know the office life before so much. I worked in travel agencies, but it's as a student. So more like this entrepreneurial lifestyle was only accessible to me in remote way. So that was natural for me, and I started
Yeah.
to also traveling more for business, and then staying longer in destinations, and observing the digital nomad life. And well, then again, I had a shift last year when I went to Bansko Nomad Fest in Bulgaria, and I was a volunteer there at the festival. And well, I stayed there for like 1 month, and then after you talk with hundreds of digital nomads, like there's no way you're not gonna travel. So yeah, then I started like more researching this and going deeper. Also traveling myself. I've been to South America for the winter and North America. So and through all of this now, since last year, I've been like observing, kind of researching first, just like for fun, for my curiosity, what this digital nomadism brings to, first of all, to tourism and to local communities, because that's what I'm mostly interested in. And then also I decided, hey, as I am interested in this, and I had to write a thesis, I said I will do something useful, and something that I'm already curious about. So mostly what's driving me now, this curiosity, is like how this is changing this way of lifestyle, remote work, digital nomadism, how it's changing local communities, and how we
Mm.
travel, how we interact with local communities. um, so this
That's
more,
really
more long
fascinating.
version of
No, but that's the kind of answer that really helps me understand the role of community and mentorship in your life that led you to approach digital. There's a lot of digital nomad content and not so much deep research, but lots of information that's very much from the perspective of the nomad traveler, whereas you've really clearly deeply considered the destination and the impact of this new kind of traveler. And obviously this traveler existed before COVID, but has exploded. And we've started to have events like Bansko where suddenly these communities are connecting in the real space as well. And it's really exciting. But not everybody listening to this would define themselves as a digital nomad. And in fact, I don't define myself as a digital nomad. I'm a really slow mad um, who often spends most of my time in one place, even though I love to travel to events and conferences and different places for work and for pleasure, or some mixture of the two. And one of the things I thought was really interesting in your research was an attempt to create some kind of typology, because we use the word nomad a lot. And when I hear myself around that word, I think, well, that's not really me. Am I some kind of imposter here? I'm not a nomad. I love my home. So, can you tell us a bit about your definitions that you used in your research, your categorization of nomadism?
Yeah, that was a very interesting thing to dive into, because it was clear immediately, like you said now, that I mean, who is actually a digital nomad? Like, it's hard to define in one way. And maybe before COVID, it was kind of, more straightforward, because a stereotypical nomad was a freelancer, working from a cheaper destination somewhere online, can travel all the time, doesn't have a fixed home, let's say, and is highly mobile. And now, because of COVID and all of this remote work, things have changed, and we have a lot of different variations, and we still use the word digital nomad because it's maybe easiest, but
Mm.
not the appropriate to define everyone. So that's why I think now this research that is happening in the digital nomad field is really important. And there are a couple of, like, really, let's say, important definitions that uh, I considered in my thesis, and also I see in other research. And I think the most interesting one for me was from researcher Reichenberger, which defined it based on defined digital nomadism, or more like the location independent lifestyle, on
Mhm.
4 levels. Where the level 0 is kind of the one that you just obtain the location independent lifestyle. So this is through remote work, obviously. But this is just the first requirement, let's say the first level, 0. And then level 1 is the one who has the location independent lifestyle, but still chooses to stay at home, or maybe does, some short maybe travels, but mostly, works from home. And then the level 2 is more interesting, and it's, I think, also based on my research from the response I got, that this is the most common one, level 2, with nomads, or like location independent people who have a home base, like me in Slovenia or you in Spain, and then travels, occasionally for longer periods of time than a typical holiday. So it has to be longer than a holiday,
Mm.
but still returns to this home base. And now, okay, we can argue, like, what is this, like, amount of time that you have to be away from home, which another academic researcher in the field defined it as 3 months, that this is the period that you need to be
Right.
away from home, which, okay, we can argue, is it 2 3 months, what is now considered, then you're a digital nomad. um, so
Then
this
I'm
is
not
again.
level 3. That would be too long for me. I'm 2.5.
Yeah, the level 3 actually is the one that I mentioned before, like maybe the most stereotypical one, the one that maximizes this location independence and
Mm.
just travels full time and doesn't have a home base. So these are kind of the scales, and I think this helps a lot, because
Yeah.
I think a lot of us can, like, put ourselves in one of these
Yeah.
scales. It's kind of a good way to also introduce people to what is a digital nomad, because, as you know, people are not totally sure what is it just this maximization of the lifestyle, or it can be also something different.
Yeah.
um,
No, that's great. It's useful for people to be able to see where they fit look at the options either side and think, do I want to go this way or that way? Where would I be comfortable with my next move?
Yeah.
So I think that's fascinating. Also, in your research, you introduced a taxonomy of values and motivations for digital nomads. And so I'd love to discuss that a bit more and how that impacts on maybe where you move on those levels as well.
Yeah, this was also very interesting to me. Like, to I think it's also important to consider like what are the motivations for living this
Mhm.
lifestyle, because that then depends on your how you act as this type of traveler, which is then important for, let's say, tourism destinations, or whoever is, catering to digital nomads, or also employers, to know what is your motivation to travel like this. And well, there i I was really like referring to Schlagwein's study. Is also another academic that like put three different levels or different motivations in terms of he called them order of worth. So there's three: inspirational, civic, and market order of worth. And basically, if we go to the inspirational one, is maybe again the one that is the most stereotypical one, or let's say, more for, I think, very common with digital nomads, is those who like really want to like work on their personal development. So it's like
Mm,
travel in terms of personal development, like growing as a person, like learning languages, getting immersed in the cultures. This is of course not just for digital nomads, but also like for backpackers. So it's very common that you travel to find yourself. It's a
mm.
common expression. So I think this could fit in this one. And then it's the civic order of worth, which is more inclined to community, like finding like-minded people. I would say these types of travelers are more inclined to stay in like co-livings,
Mm.
visit these kinds of events, like we mentioned, Bansko, or other like conferences, to really connect with other travelers and also with locals. So basically, it's about shared experiences and visiting new places and meeting new people, which is also interesting in terms of digital nomads, because yeah, we know that always you look for a digital nomad community. I think this is also really common. And then the last one is the market order of worth, which is more economically based. And it's basically, we can say that those who fit in this category are pursuing like the maximization of the lifestyle, but by using this, location independence, and choosing where to live to for your dollar or euro to go further.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so choosing destinations like, cheaper destinations, maybe, struggling economies like now Argentina. And this is very, very common as well. It's a
Mm.
common term as well used here, geo arbitrage, which a lot of digital nomads are using, to yeah, just be able to afford better things for less money, let's say, to
Mm.
live a more comfortable life with because your this is actually maybe one of the biggest privileges of our time now, to like work remotely and choose where you're gonna live
Yeah,
based on that, so it's a kind of an interesting topic to follow.
definitely. So did your research indicate that people tend to be somewhere on a spectrum then of all three of those motivations to different extents?
Yeah, it was mostly like the motive when I asked about the motivations for living this lifestyle. It was basically all of those were answered kind of in a similar level. And I think we
Yeah.
cannot like, I think you're never just like one, especially with digital nomads. The ones, I know, there we can put ourselves in all of these three categories as well.
Yes.
So it's not only one motivation that drives you for this lifestyle. Usually there's much more to it, and it was the same in my research. I could not say, hey, this is the main motivation for living the lifestyle.
Yeah. So once you get to that level zero, that you've separated your work from a location, then you can see where those three factors take you, whether
Mm.
it's just to work in a co-working in your local village, or whether it's going to take you around the world so you can leverage some geo arbitrage in another
Yeah,
country, or take up a digital nomad visa. Then we get into is it 3 months or 6 months or whatever, what makes a digital nomad on paper?
yeah,
And does that satisfy your inspirational needs
hmm,
along the way?
yeah.
But we'll get there in the end. The regulation will catch up, I guess.
Yeah, I think so too. That's why we need to talk about these definitions and to, I think also, I mean, in terms of visas that we need to first understand, like, who is this remote worker, digital nomad,
Yes,
like, to be able to design a proper visa and paperwork and everything. This is, I think, the biggest struggle right now in the administrative part of digital
yeah,
nomadism.
absolutely, yes. And it's interesting to see how much investment and how much prominence is going into these solutions, the compliance side and the visas, and as the regulation tries to catch up with the technology and with the humanity, that everybody's out of lockdown and on the road, and
Yeah.
somehow we have to make the employment law catch up, and the tax and everything else. It's always lagging behind. And what we need for that is primary research, such as you have conducted. This will all help the policymakers hopefully
Hopefully.
develop frameworks that let us choose the way we want to live. And how much did your research reflect on the way that how we live is changing, and how digital nomads are managing their day to day, the work life balance, the balance of being a traveler, being a tourist versus being a professional or an entrepreneur?
Mm.
How are people handling that? Is that changing?
Yeah, so I didn't focus like explicitly on that, but well, we can discuss it, of course.
Even from your
Um,
own experience.
yeah, from my own, yeah. Well, I think it's changing. Like I said, for me, like, it was kind of normal as, okay, it's an entrepreneurial, way. It's a remote way of working, so it was kind of natural to go into it. And it's interesting then to observe some like generations who have not previously worked remotely and then had to adjust. And so it's a completely different kind of mindset as you go into it.
Mm,
And I think my personal opinion is that this could change for the better. Of course, there are challenges because to get used to working remotely and to be, behind the screen home with no, like, maybe colleagues to talk to or discipline, it could like also affect. I mean, it is affecting our work-life balance and our, I don't know, emotional struggles and burnouts as well. So
mm,
I think now could be needed, is like what you're doing here, educating about remote work and how it's done, like how people are doing it, how, what is beneficial, what is not. How can you maybe more optimize your remote lifestyle, through different motivations that you have. So I would say it's like, upside down how it's reshaping the future of work-life balance. But once we grasp it, and have these techniques how to work remotely and how to also be able to travel and at the same time work remotely,
mm.
that we can,
Yeah.
have a better work-life balance than we did before.
I sometimes think a lot of the content around digital nomadism is so aspirational that it's all about the beautiful beaches and the landscapes and the experiences, and we don't see enough of people working in order to actually pay for that and achieve that. And I don't know, sometimes I get frustrated. It's not just the stock photography, it's the very image-led blogs and everything else that's very much about the beaches and the palm trees, the beautiful people and the beautiful landscapes. And do we need more emphasis on the work to really make this real for people?
Yeah, yeah, I would 100% agree on that. And because once you like start, traveling and working, it's like a totally different picture than what you see on TikTok and Instagram, especially if you have to work like 8 hours, 10
Mm,
hours a day, so it's like the balance that you need to, or the discipline that you need to have in that sense is, I think, like huge. So I
yeah.
think it's one of the biggest challenges. And yeah, I don't see, now that you mentioned, a lot of like you see influencers saying, "Oh, I live the digital nomad life, how I live," but you don't see anyone saying, "Hey, how I managed to work like 10 hours a day, but still live the digital nomad life, and for the weekends still enjoy and see the sights and the destination." So I'm completely agree that we need more talking about this, like how to
Mm.
actually uh, consider our work-life balance, because that was a big challenge for me. Like when I came to South America, and then you're suddenly overwhelmed by everything, and it's
Yeah.
for the first time and everything, and then the language, it's just all of these like barriers and finding the community, and it's just like so many things that so there are like people or services that help you, like the digital nomad toolkits and everything. There exist services for that, but I don't think there's enough of that yet. So
Mm.
that's definitely a niche, a need for future digital nomads.
Yeah, we need to find better ways of talking realistically about the work, I think, and not just trying to sell the inspiration and the dream of the destination. But I think
Mm.
for me, it feels like there's too much emphasis on that at the moment and not enough talking about the realities of if you're doing, say, a customer service type job or something fairly low hourly paid, then you've got to put long hours in if
Yeah.
you want to support that travel lifestyle. And you might have to arrive at a new destination and just get your head down rather than go party. And maybe there's too much content from the people who are it's all about passive income and buy my course and you can make money while you sleep or while you travel the world and so on. So yeah, let's get real and talk about work-life balance, because the people who do make it work on the road and people like yourself who have managed to study and create knowledge are some of the most disciplined and effective and productive workers I've ever known, because they can work. People say, "Oh, people aren't as productive working from home." Well, what about working in a new country or in an airport? Or if you
Yeah.
can work there, you have the most amazing self-discipline. I know that I'm much
Yeah,
more
man.
productive at home than anywhere else, and I know that I'm really productive if I'm about to go on a trip, because I feel I must get things done and cleared away so I can have that time to not have to concentrate on that when I'm traveling. So yeah, I think that's an important part of the puzzle. We'll have to do some more research on that. So let's talk about the future of work then and digital nomadism. How do you see this movement growing, and how will it impact the global economy and the way that organizations and enterprises work in the future?
Mm. Yeah, well, now it's again, like we said, a completely different shift, because we have also not just freelancers working remotely and traveling, but also companies are allowing their employees to also travel. So
Mm.
there is a big also trend in that. So that again brings new challenges of, let's say, management and company leadership, which I think is going to be inevitable. And there are already countries, as you know, that give you the right basically to say, "Hey, I can work remotely and I can work from anywhere." So I think this is just going to get like more mainstream as it is now. When first the progressive countries take over, then other countries, like always. But I think it's inevitable that we will have this shift. And then how is this changing the work life balance? Well, it again opens up new possibilities and new opportunities, new dangers as well, new let's say challenges, and I don't know, just for one example, the infrastructure. So the co-workings, the co-livings, everything will have to be more catered, because we will have more and more remote workers. So the infrastructure is going to have to change from less like company offices to more common offices. So we see this changing the global economy already, and especially in progressive countries and those who already have digital nomads. Like I have to say, in Slovenia, for example, who we don't have digital nomads that much. We still don't yet have as many co-workings, and you see in countries that they're receiving digital nomads, you can see the rise in this. Or not just digital nomads, but also locals who work remotely. Maybe this is
Mm.
a bigger shift, and then countries will react. When more and more companies will allow the locals to work remotely. to also cater to which is always the case. Destination first needs to cater to the locals, then the visitors come in. It has to be in this way. Then it's again another thing that is mixing, and it's kind of we're seeing a kind of a mix of work and leisure, or which is also a blurred line that comes now, because you can, if you don't have a fixed schedule, you can work, anytime, which is already common in most tech positions, and in marketing. And this again brings totally new concept of when we have free time, what we do in our free time, which is actually how we, engage in also travel and travel related services, let's say. I don't want to say just holiday, because it's not a holiday, because you also work at the same time. So it kind of brings up new perspective of what is leisure, what is tourism, what is travel, and that's like really fascinating to me. Like,
Yeah, we need a whole
totally
new
changes.
vocabulary, don't we, to try and encompass this, because we're not tourists, we're not travelers in that sort of gap year, find yourself way. We're more than that, but maybe staying longer. I've heard the awful word leisure used to describe that business of leisure. As a writer, that just makes me cringe because it's such a terrible word, but I haven't come across something that describes business and leisure
Yeah.
in a better way. Workation, I'm seeing catching on, but that's being trademarked in some circumstances. So I don't know what we're going to call it in the end, but we just have this completely blended work, life, travel spectrum to enjoy, I guess. So it's pretty exciting. Tell me about what you're excited about for the future. What's the most interesting thing coming up for you now? Bansko is past. What you didn't go for that one? You've just had your event in Slovenia. What's coming up next?
Yeah, like what's next for me is well, we just, yeah, like you said, we finished an event in Slovenia. It was kind of a retreat, let's say. We called it a living learning lab, and it was
Mm-hmm.
the first prototype of events, or let's say co-living experiences that we want to organize more, not just in Slovenia, also abroad. And this was actually kind of a breakthrough for our team, because we saw now what is possible with remote work, with digital nomadism, how this can affect like really small and sensitive communities, because the event was organized in a very, very small village of maybe 200 people
Wow,
in
very small.
Slovenia. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a very small village on the border with Italy. And we invited a couple of digital nomads and local youth, so mostly students from our university and abroad. We had a participant from India coming in for the event, which was very interesting. And so the premise of the event was to see how we can, like, with these long-term stays, and with especially with the digital nomads, remote workers, how we can impact communities and make more like meaningful interactions between these visitors and the locals.
Mm-hmm. So what do
And
the
how
locals think of these strange nomads?
yeah, it was very, very interesting interactions. Like, because we have to understand, yeah, that these locals, they have their own jobs. They usually, they don't, they don't work remotely. They are either, maybe in agriculture or wine business, or accommodation business. So okay, some are used to travelers because it's also becoming a touristic destination slowly,
Mm.
but mostly it was a very interesting experience, but very positive one. Like, we had really positive interactions between foreigners and the locals. So this was
Great.
really interesting to see. Also, we had, for example, we had a kind of a experience with a local hunter, so they could go and observe animals in the night. And well, it was, let's say, totally different, because the girl I mentioned from India, she went first time, to for this kind of experience. And also
Mm.
others from, all over the world, they do not necessarily go into such a, touristic, because it's not a touristic experience. It's actually a very local experience,
Yeah.
which you only get like if you know the person. So
Yes, you're not
this
going to
was
find that on a package holiday or
no,
somewhere.
no. So these interactions were the goal of what we wanted to do, like to keep it really what the locals are already doing, and hey,
Mhm.
let's bring a couple of, not too much, visitors to observe this lifestyle, and also vice versa for the locals to observe what they do and how, because the remote work is as well, not as spread it in the digital nomad world or the field. So this dynamic is what we wanted to create. And in terms of the first prototype, it was like we were really satisfied with the result. And yeah, now for the future we really want to like create more and more long term, because this was an experiment for 1 week, but we
Mhm.
want to create more like 1 month, 2 months residencies like this, and maybe in the future to build like a network of these types of locations, small villages, rural areas, which you could move from, stay 1 month in Slovenia in a village, then go to Austria, then Croatia, and still have the same experience by immersing yourself in the local environment and being with locals, and just you sharing your lifestyle and they sharing their lifestyle. So these types of exchanges is kind of our goal now, what we want to create.
Sounds wonderful. I love the way that you're fusing the technology and the advances that let us work like this from wherever with these incredibly localized traditions and ways of living and ways of being, and connecting those two sounds like a wonderful project to be involved with. If people want to learn more, where's the best way for them to follow your work, Rudi? You've got a Substack, I believe.
Yeah, I'm writing weekly. Every Sunday, I write a blog, a newsletter about about this what we were talking about now. Now I'm focusing on this, on the impacts of this digital nomadism and remote work, on specifically on destinations, on tourism. So maybe I can provide a link. The Substack is
Yeah,
called Rudy's Travel Journal. I also have a
great.
website, rudymedved.com, and I'm on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. So whatever it's easier to connect.
Brilliant. That's well, we'll put all those links in the show notes, but you've spelled them out for anybody who's just listening and wants to dash over there now, stop
Yeah,
driving or whatever you're doing, but then go and sign up for Rudy's newsletter. Rudy, thank you. I've really enjoyed this conversation. It's given me lots to think about the future of travel and work and how those things are going to blend beautifully. I really appreciate you being part of the Future is Freelance.
yeah. Thanks, Maya. It was really a pleasure to talk about these topics, which I hope people will find interesting.
Thank you for listening to the Future is Freelance podcast. We appreciate your time and attention in a busy world and your busy freelance life. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a fellow freelancer and help us grow this movement of independent entrepreneurs. If you rate and review The Future is Freelance in whichever app you're listening to right now, it really helps spread the word, and that means we can reach more people who need to hear this message. Together we can change the world and make sure the future is freelance. Don't forget you can check out all our back episodes from other seasons and learn more over at futureisfreelance.xyz. We're so grateful not only for our listeners but for the contributions of our wonderful guests and for the production and marketing assistance of Coffee Like Media. This is Maya Middlemiss wishing you freelance freedom and happiness until our next show.